Hi, doing Chapter 9, Section 4, Fitting Exponential Models to Data. And I want to first make the comment, the book has two really cool ways to do it manually without a calculator. Highly recommend checking it out if that kind of thing interests you. But we're going to go through and do an exponential regression. If you think back to Chapter 3, we did linear regressions. In Chapter 6, we did quadratic regressions. This is really the same sort of thing. So we're going to try to do this first part pretty quickly. So the first part, finding an exponential regression. So if I pull up my calculator, first thing we do is, for these regressions, when in doubt, if you're lost, hit the stat key. That's usually what you need to do. We need to edit to put our points in. And now, first thing to do is clear out the points that are in there. There's several ways to do it. One is to go up, press clear, and then down. You remember, I said before, if you go up to the list, so it gives me all the points in list 2, press clear. Don't do delete. If you do delete, it gets rid of L2, and then you have to do second insert, second 2, and so on and so forth. But, alright, once we get those points in there, or those points cleared out, now we put the points in. So my x values are 2, 3, 7. I'm just copying the ones from the chart on the right side of the screen. Then my y values, 9.25, 15.73, and 131.31. You may want to do this as well on your calculator just to make sure you're remembering it right. And 645. Good, especially when getting it right really matters, to make sure you put your points in right, because if you mess up on any one of those points, you're going to get the wrong answer, and it's real hard to give partial credit. Okay, when in doubt in doing this, hit the stat button. So once you get the points in, if you're lost, go back to hit your stat key. Now we want to hit calculate. You'll notice we had linear regressions 4 from before and 5 quadratic regressions. We did both of those, but exponential regressions don't show up. But we have this arrow over here by the 7. So you could hit down a bunch of times. I'm just going to hit up, and we see the rest of the list. And we want this exponential regression. So if I press 0, it selects that. Hit enter, we get the equation. And the equation's in the form y equals a times b to the x. And it gives me my a and b value. So it's y equals a times b to the x. So write that out a second. I wouldn't actually write this in the answer, just want to make sure I'm not losing people. And then the a value was 3.2, and the b value was 1.7, if I remember correctly. So put in a and b. Make sure you round correctly. I'll double check those numbers. So 3.2, 1.7. Yep, so I'm good. That's how you do exponential regressions. Moving on, the second part of the section asks, well, does the equation fit the data? And there's several ways you could determine that. One is if you go back to your graphing calculator, you'll notice mine has the r squared and an r. And that'll show up if you have your diagnostics turned on. R being your correlation coefficient tells you, is it a good fit? And before, if it was close to 1 or -1, it's going to be a good fit. So here we're real close to 1. So we know that this is a really good fit. I picked points that essentially fit the equation almost perfectly. If you don't have these, a way that you could turn them on is if you go to second and then your 0 button. Oops. How can I get this to be working for me? So second, I wrote on the screen. So second, and then the 0 key. That brings up my catalog. Now I want to turn diagnostics on, kind of like a doctor you're going to be diagnosing. I made a little alpha symbol here on the upper right of the screen. So I can press the button that has the D right above it. That takes me down to the D's. Then you go down till you see diagnostics on. Diagnostics on. So if you go there, press enter once to select it, enter to do it one more time. Now if you'd run the exponential regression, you'll get the r squared and the r. Other things you can do would be to check for a constant growth factor. And by that I'm saying, well, as a x value goes up by 1, is my y value going up by the same amount every time? Because x is your exponent, so if my exponent gets 1 bigger, I'm multiplying by b one more time. So to do that, I could do my 15.73 divided by 9.25. Quick. Grab a calculator so I don't have to keep switching programs. So 15.73 divided by 9.25. So I get a b value of 1.7, which we know fits. I'm going to quick write that in here. So we just did the equation, so times 1.7. But now if you look here, that jump is significantly larger than 1.7 times 15. Instead, that's 131.31 divided by 15.73. That's like 8.3 times bigger. And that messes a lot of people up. But the reason it works is, if you see here, we're not going up one step for our exponents. We're not multiplying by b one more time. We're going from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. So we're going like 4 jumps here. So in other words, this is really times b times b times b times b, or times b to the 4th. So you need to kind of keep that in mind. So if you wanted to do that, where I did 131.31 divided by 15.73, in my calculator I came up with 8.34. 8.34. Well, that should be b to the 4th power. So now if I go through and do the 4th root of that, so if I do math, this calculator, so if I do 4, and then my math button, pick number 5, and then put in my answer. So if I do the 4th root of 8.34, I get a 1.699778. So essentially it is times 1.7 again. So if I divide these two, I should get a 1.7, because that's one step. This here is 2, so I could divide, and then I'd get b squared, so square root it, see if I get 1.7. Or once you get your growth factor once, you could do 2.23.22 times 1.7 times 1.7. That'd work also. So kind of a hokey way, not nearly as nice as just looking at a correlation coefficient. Another way would be to graph the points and the regression equation. And I'm going to jump ahead quick a sec and then come back to this. So I want to make a comment. There's a couple questions in the book that say X is the number of years after, say 1960 or something like that. And then later on in the question, people see Y equals 4.2 times, so that's my A, just really making up numbers, 1.5 to the X. And then it says, well, if the year is 2000, and so people will put a 2000 here in for X, and they forget that it's the number of years after I kind of made up the 1960. So if you're talking year 2000, you need to make sure that you subtract 1960 from that, whatever your starting year is, and then you'd have to put a 40 in for the exponent. So hopefully say that, that'll cut off some of you at the pass. This last part is a way to graph the points and see that equation nicely go right through the points. You could feel free to watch, feel free to not watch, it's up to you. But this is how you do it with the graphing calculator. So you can be done with the notes in my class if you want. If I go back to my calculator, and I'm just going to clear out of there, if you could do second enter till you get back to your equation. I'll maybe just hit stat, go over to calc, and then go to my exponential regressions. That's going to be number 0 again. Now I could get the x and y, or the a and b values, into graphing a couple different ways. One way is this. So I could do exponential regression. The first thing I do is second 1 to tell it my x values are in L1, and the comma key is right above the 7. Then I could do second 2, so now my y values I'm telling it are in list 2, and now comma again. Now I want to tell it where to put the equation. So you have this vars button, a variable button, right by the down arrow, and it's going to be a y variable. We're trying to graph this, and it's a function. And now you pick which equation you want to put it in. So I'm going to put it in y1, and then hit enter. Now it gives me the exact same information as before, but if you look here on my screen there, or if you press y equals, now you have that equation put in with all the decimals that the calculator gave. Another way to do it where you'll get a pretty close approximation would just be to go to your y1 or y2 and type in the equation manually. 3.2, you could do the rounding, times 1.7 to the x. But that gets the equation, so now I'll be able to get the exponential curve. Now we want to also be able to see where are the points. Does it go through the points? So above your y equals button you have a stat plot. So if you do second and y equals, it goes up to the stat plot, and pick any one of those. I'm going to pick plot 1, and I want to turn it on. The type, this type here means that it's just going to put the dots on the screen. This would connect all the points together, and then these are used for statistical analysis. So my x values are L1, my y values are list 2. You can pick any of these. I like the squares because they show up best on the screen. If you pick the dots and the curve goes right through it, you won't be able to tell a dot from a point, and it's kind of hard to see. Alright, so now if I do this, if I press, so it's all turned on, all set to go. If I press graph, I forgot my window is messed up from last time I used my calculator, but however the window is set, I'm not seeing anything. And if I'd gone to my window or zoom and then done my standard window, I don't know if I would have seen anything there either. I guess I see 1 point in the start of that curve, so it doesn't tell me much. But instead, if you do zoom, and again we have more below number 7, so I'm going to press my up arrow. This newer operating system has a lot of stuff I'm not used to seeing. I'm going to go till I see zoom stat, which for mine is number 9. Now it's going to zoom in on the points in that stat menu. So I can see my 5 points there, and the curve goes right through the middle pretty much of all of them except for 1. So it looks like a good fit that way. Now I always have people that run into trouble later, they forget to turn this off. So when you don't want it to graph the points anymore, if you go second and then your Y1 button is the stat plot, and easiest probably just to pick number 4 saying, hey, turn my plots off for me. And now if I go to y equals, you'll see that none of those plot 1, plot 2, plot 3 are highlighted. That's the end of the notes on exponential regressions. Hope this helped.